Today on the official Marvel podcast, we're joined by Marvel Studios, the Fantastic Four First Steps director, Matt Shakman.
You see old, familiar New York with these kind of shoots, these green shoots of Reed Richards technology growing out of the ground around it. It was just about kind of understanding what people in the 60s thought the future would look like, then bringing that back to a base level 60s period movie.
And we'll hear from Marvel Comics Vice President and Executive Editor Tom Brevoort about Fantastic Four First Steps, issue number 1.
It's a one-shot, and it's designed to be a copy of the Fantastic Four comic book that you could buy in the film.
Plus, we'll speak with physicist David Smith about the real-world science of invisibility.
I'm Evan Narcis.
I'm Victoria Yang.
And this is the official Marvel podcast. Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps is right around the corner.
That's right. The first family is entering the MCU in retro-futuristic fashion, and director Matt Shakman couldn't be more excited about the film's release.
And he's no stranger to the MCU, having previously directed Marvel Studios' WandaVision. Here's Matt on setting the Fantastic Four First Steps in a version of the 1960s we've never seen before.
The Fantastic Four were created in the 60s during the space race. It was the time of optimism, of looking to the stars, and the idea that technology and heart can solve any problem, right? And it's so baked into the DNA of the comic book that it just felt like, why not set it in that time? We wanted it to feel like 60s New York City, but with a layer of retrofuturism on top of it. But what I love about New York City is it shows its layers of history, right? You can see the beginning, you can see the dawn of the century, you can see the 60s, you can see the present day, and they all still coexist in a great way when you go to New York. So we wanted to add that layer of what if Reed Richards existed, and he would have been doing things really important in society for many decades before they became the Fantastic Four. He would have wonderkind, he was a child prodigy, he's Steve Jobs meets Einstein, so the idea that he would have changed the technology in this city felt really exciting to us. You see old, familiar New York with these kind of shoots, these green shoots of Reed Richards technology growing out of the ground around it. It was just about kind of understanding what people in the 60s thought the future would look like, then bringing that back to a base level 60s period movie. So that's what it was. It was like, what if the House of Tomorrow wasn't tomorrow, but was today in a New York City that we also recognized?
The Fantastic Four First Steps starts from a very earnest, happy place, and as Matt explains, the tonal shift that happens later on isn't something he took lightly.
We wanted to make sure that we were talking about the optimism of the world that the Fantastic Four had created, in a sense. They came back from space, changed forever, and it's in the comic books. Instead of hiding out with their powers, they wanted to use them for good. It's a classic Marvel thing. How do you use great power for, what's the responsibility of having great power? And so they change their society, but they do it not just by arresting criminals the way that Spidey does. They do it by changing the very fabric of society, right? They're introducing new technologies. It's a time of peace. It's a time of prosperity. And it's a time of optimism that matches what was happening in the 60s and what was happening in Marvel Comics, right? And so we wanted to start with a world that was a kind of utopia. They're the only heroes in this world. They're making things work on a societal level. They're protecting people. And yet they're also kind of like the president and the secretary general of the UN and all these things, they're living a very public life that's an example for everybody. And then this world that is so perfect and so peaceful is challenged by the arrival of the Silver Surfer. And we wanted to see, how does that fabric of that society start to fray a little bit? And then how does the Fantastic Four bring that society back together?
In a larger-than-life production like the Fantastic Four First Steps, music is absolutely a character. Here's Matt describing how he and composer Michael Giacchino worked together on the already iconic theme.
Michael Giacchino is a master. He's unbelievable. He's one of my favorite composers, if not my favorite. And when I was starting this project, he was the person that came to mind to be the perfect person to do this. He can do anything tonally. And he's also just an incredible guy and such a fan of that, the projects that he works on. Gets so deeply invested. He's so passionate about it. And so when I was starting this process, I immediately reached out to him. And we had lots of meetings to talk about what it would be. And then he started tinkering with music before we even began filming. And he sent me the theme. And it was unbelievable because I suddenly felt the movie. I mean, I knew the movie I was making, and he was writing something that reflected the movie we were talking about making. I knew I felt it. I could feel all of the moments. I could feel the intimate moments. I could feel the big soaring moments. I knew that it felt incredibly distinctive. And that's one of the things that Michael does so well is he works with tone, of course, but thematically, you can think of a piece of music and you remember the movie, right? And so when I heard it, it was amazing. I was like, no notes. This is it. This helps me understand exactly what we're doing in a way. And it was a wonderful thing. I played it for the actors. They were excited. And that's what the gift of great music is.
So what was it like casting the Fantastic Four themselves? Matt breaks down his process finding Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, and Eben Moss-Bachrach.
Casting is so important to every film. And it's very important when you're bringing legendary characters to life. And Reed Richards is a complicated character because he's a scientist. He's in his laboratory 5 seconds away from destroying the world or saving it at every second. He is an inventor. He's cerebral. He's maybe better with things of the mind than he is with things of the heart. I like to say he's great for all mankind, but maybe struggles a little bit with individual men. He's not someone you take to a party necessarily. But it was really important to me, though, that Reed also, he's not an unemotional person. He's actually a very emotional person. He loves his family so deeply and would do anything for them. And the trick is just that he doesn't often know how to express it. And he often doesn't know how to access it. He's not a person of indecision. He's a person of action. He's an interesting combination of so many different characteristics, which makes him a very unusual Marvel hero. And so for us, it was about trying to capture all of those elements. What I love about Pedro is that he communicates great intelligence. He is a person of action, but he's also a person of deep thought. There's a cerebral aspect of him. But his emotional capacity as an actor is incredible. And when you see that open up, as he does several times in this film, I think you understand that, Reed Richards is a person of deep complexity and nuance, right? Vanessa Kirby is an amazing actress. She's a person of great range as a performer. She has also that emotional accessibility that Pedro has, and I knew that they would be able to create great chemistry and that the emotional stakes of the movie would exist really well because of their abilities as performers. So it was really just a gut instinct that she would be the right person for it based on the work that I had seen and the meetings that we had. She was really in love with the character and was going deep into her research about who Sue was and could be. And that was just very inspiring to me as well. And that was before she even got the part, just in our conversations. I think Joe Quinn's a phenomenal actor. He's so alive. He brings so much to what he does. He has a spark that feels like young Robert Downey Jr. And I also know that he's capable of anything. He's this soulful character to me. The idea that he's just a playboy or he's just a guy who likes the life of the party, he's more than that. Johnny Storm is really smart. He is Sue's brother, but he loves to live the high life. He's also an adrenaline junkie. He loves to fly. He's probably the one who enjoys his power the most. He's a bit of a rock star, but in our movie, he's also a rock star who's been a rock star for 4 years and is beginning to wonder what else is there. And he's dreaming of what else is out there. We want him to be all of those things, but I want him to contain multitudes. And I knew that within Joe, there was a cocky bravado, a great sense of humor, but there was also a vulnerability and an emotional accessibility that made him a well-rounded character. Eben has incredible vulnerability, but also strength. And he seems so tough on the outside, but is so soft on the inside. And those characters just kind of break your heart. And that's Ben. He is the toughest character. He literally is impervious. And yet he's very soft on the inside. There's a lot of vulnerability there. And that's what makes Ben a favorite character in comics, favorite character in Marvel, is that, he's also funny, he's charming. And so we wanted to try a way to bring him to life. But also there's a lot of sad sack Ben in the comics. And we wanted, again, 4 years on, he's living with this. He has reminders of it. He has moments where it's hard, but he's moving forward, right? He's moving forward. He's figuring it out. And he's living with it. How do you live with it? How do you live with this change? Because he's the only one who can't turn his power on and off.
Matt was also thrilled to add Julia Garner to play the Silver Surfer and Ralph Ineson as Galactus.
I've been a big fan of Julia Garner. She's an incredible actor and she's done a wide range. Just like everybody in our cast, I was just basically looking for Swiss Army knives. I was looking for people who had every tool that they could do everything. She is a really facile actor. She can go kind of any way. And I knew that the surfer ultimately had to have that journey, a journey of remembering her humanity, of being able to go to a place of emotionality in the same way that a stoic Reed Richards has to go there. But that at the same time, I needed that restraint, that kind of bottled up, this is my job, I do my job, this is what I do at the beginning. She's just fearless. I think her first day she showed up, I put her in a motion capture suit with a helmet camera for the first time, which is bizarre, but she was like, okay. And then I put her on a 40-foot tall lift in front of 400 extras in Times Square, put a microphone on her and said, here, go ahead and deliver this giant monologue about being the Herald of Galactus. And without batting an eye, she just jumped in and just took over. Galactus is huge, and one of the things we wanted to make sure that we captured was that scale. And it's very hard because when you're trying to sell something that big and he's in a ship designed for something that big, everything is scaled to him. And what's so great about Star Wars when the, Imperial destroyer flies over is you can see the little windows and little doors and all the things that are human scale to it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I get how big that is. But it's really hard when everything is giant. But we approached it practically. We built a beautiful suit, which has incredible detail. And we have a wonderful performance at the heart of it. And that, I think, grounds everything again.
Matt has his own personal reasons on why this movie means so much to him and why it might resonate with other parents.
It's a huge opportunity. It's a huge, very special opportunity to bring characters to life that I've loved on the page, that have been a part of my life for so long as a fan. When I was thinking about the movie, I kept going back to just an image that I had of my daughter when she was like a week old and I was falling asleep and we were both asleep in a chair, like, snoring away or whatever. And that's the movie to me, right? It's not stretching. It's not invisibility. It's not Fantastic Cars. It's that, right? It's like children change your life. And it was about how do I make relatable everything that they're going through because they're fantastic, right? And then you're worried about their future. Like parental anxiety is what, anyone who's a parent, and everyone, we were all children too. We all saw our parents stress out for us. And ultimately, we all have to realize as parents that our children's lives are outside of our control.
Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four: First Steps arrives on July 25th, only in theaters. In other exciting Fantastic Four related news, Fantastic Four First Steps issue number 1 is available in your local comic shop right now.
That's right, Victoria. And lucky me, I had the opportunity to speak with Marvel Comics VP and executive editor Tom Brevoort about how this comic directly connects to Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four: First Steps. I'm joined by Marvel Comics VP and executive editor Tom Brevoort. Thanks so much for chatting with us. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them what you do?
I'm Tom Brevoort, the VP of Publishing and Executive Editor for Marvel Comics. I directly edit all of the X-Men books, under which my title is Conductor of X. I also edit a bunch of things that are not X-Men, including Fantastic Four, and I'm doing cosmic stuff with Imperial right now. And in the past, I edited Avengers for 26 years, and pretty much if it's a title somewhere in the Marvel Universe, chances are I've done something associated with it.
So we're here to talk about the Fantastic Four, Marvel's first family, as longtime fans know. We're here to talk specifically about a very special project that's coming out connected to the upcoming film. So tell us about Fantastic Four: First Steps, the comic book project.
Well, Fantastic Four: First Steps, it's a one-shot, and it's designed to be a copy of the Fantastic Four comic book that you could buy in the film. So if you went down to the corner drugstore on Yancey Street in the movie, this would be the book that would be sitting there waiting for you on the racks. The official licensed Fantastic Four comic that exists in the world of the film.
I love this because, to me, as somebody who's loved the Fantastic Four for such a long time, this is meta on top of meta on top of meta. So what's the basic premise of the story, and how collaborative was it to come up with an idea that would work on the page versus on the screen?
Well, we took our cues from the screenplay. And so in the film, the Fantastic Four are a going proposition as soon as the movie opens. They've been superheroes for a number of years. And so that opened up a little avenue for us to tell, what was the first time these characters were seen in the public? What was their debut, and how did that go? Some of that material is referenced in the film, and every place that it is, we picked up on those moments. There's material there where we picked up dialogue or we picked up moments and then expanded on them to tell what is hopefully a satisfying story in and of itself, in the context of being, this is sort of the anniversary edition of Fantastic Four in the world of the film. That because this celebration of the FF's existence is a plot point right at the start of the movie, our comic fits in as sort of something that the Marvel Comics of that world put out in celebration of that anniversary. So it all kind of loops back together into a weird meta thing.
Awesome. So we obviously have Ben, Sue, Johnny, and Reed. But besides the Fantastic Four themselves, who are some other characters that we might expect to see in this one shot?
One of the characters, we don't see her on the page, but we see her in the book, is the Future Foundation's chief of staff, Lynn Nichols. She's a character in the film, and the thing I love about this, the best little Easter egg for me that nobody else will notice, is the opening of our book is like a letter from the Future Foundation explaining what the comic is, and that it's the celebratory thing and so forth, and it's written from the perspective of Lynn Nichols. And Grant and Nick, the producers, went and got the actor who portrays the character in the film to sign the letter. So the signature that's there is the actual legitimate Lynn Nichols signature.
So do you have a favorite member of the Fantastic Four?
Well, having edited them all, I have love for all of them, but my favorite Marvel character has always been the Thing. I'm a Thing guy.
That's amazing. So why do you think your average reader is so excited to see the FF finally enter the MCU?
Well, I think for those who have been around the Marvel Universe for any length of time, the Fantastic Four have always been sort of a key central piece of that. And up until this point, they haven't existed in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it feels like one of the foundational bricks has kind of just not been there, because by dint of what characters they had access to, they started with all the Avengers characters, who in publishing, came shortly thereafter, but the Fantastic Four were always the first. And so there's kind of a four-shaped hole in the cinematic world, and one that I think that readers who go back 5 or 10 years kind of feel like it's an area that's missing. It's a thing that hasn't been expressed, and it hasn't been expressed in that world. People understand, anybody that read comics years ago or now really, but going back in the day, understand how fundamental the Fantastic Four are to everything that came thereafter. And so being able to see them be a part of this larger experience, I think people are hopefully really ready for it.
So what would readers need to know before diving into this story?
Honestly, readers don't need to know anything. We tell you everything that you need to know. I mean, we literally open with the origin, and you go right into the story, and you meet the characters almost like you're meeting them for the first time. While there will be plenty of people that I'm sure will see the film and go, that was great, I want more, let me buy this comic. There's certainly going to be a lot of people who buy it before they see the film. And so you kind of had to be able to wrap your head around everything that we're showing you, even before you've experienced the actual story of that movie.
You said fans can come in cold, they can come in clean without knowing anything. But for those who are more well-versed in the First Family's adventures in comic book form, any Easter eggs that they should look out for?
Well, certainly our story is littered sort of with references, parallel references to, the earliest Fantastic Four stories. That's kind of by design. But we got access to, and we picked up and used and ran a whole bunch of material that had been created for the film. So there are ads for Johnny Storm's fan club and interviews with Reed Richards from like a scientific journal, and a whole page dedicated, almost like a vintage car ad for the Fantastic Car. So to me, the fun of it is being able to tether it so concretely to the look and feel and the flavor of what that team is putting together in the film.
Tom, this has been great. Thanks again for joining us.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All this talk about the Fantastic Four has me thinking about Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, of course. Like, how close are we to invisibility in the real world?
That's actually a great question for me, since I am now an expert on invisibility.
Victoria, I'm not trying to hate on you, but I find that a little hard to believe since this is the first I'm hearing about it. Also, I can see you, so please explain.
Okay, I might have exaggerated a little, but I did speak with an actual expert about invisibility. Take a listen to my interview with physicist David Smith. I'm joined by Dr. David Smith. Dr. Smith, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them what you do?
I'm a faculty member at Duke University in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And what I've done is really been in the field of something called metamaterials, which are artificial structures that kind of act like natural materials. And there's a lot of interesting things that we can do with those types of materials that you can't do with conventional materials. And some of that has allowed us to do things to create materials that really don't have an analog in nature, things like invisibility cloaks and some of these more exotic types of things that you can imagine, but couldn't make with conventional materials. And that's really my area of research.
That sounds so cool. How does the concept of invisibility fit into the work that you do?
The concept of invisibility is something that emerged. It wasn't something we were looking at and trying to do. It emerged in the context of the materials we were making. And at some point we realized, hey, we've got a lot of interesting types of materials we can make, responses that aren't easy to get in naturally occurring materials, and we can control this. And, we did a number of interesting experiments that have really now since become sort of defining of the field of metamaterials. But one of our collaborators, Sir John Pendry, suggested maybe with all this flexibility, maybe there's a way to do something really that would really be jaw-dropping. And he created this mathematics behind what's now called the invisibility cloak. And that was just really a structure that would act like an invisibility cloak, taking waves, breaking them up, and then restoring them as if they'd passed through free space. And that really was such a, just a unique thing to do with the material. It hadn't been done before, and is exactly the kind of thing that you would imagine for an invisibility cloak, how you might bend light around a structure. And so that is the connection. It's not something we set out to do. It just sort of fell into our lap, and really glad it did because it was a lot of fun.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the research and design that went into the invisibility project?
So there's a number of aspects of this that contributed. We make these little structures. They look like little circuits, and they can control either the electric or magnetic response of a material at point by point. So we arrange these like little rings and wires in such a way that we mimic what would be like an assembly of a bunch of different types of materials. And in doing so, we have to follow some sort of prescription of what material goes where. And that material prescription came out of something that Sir John Pendry developed called transformation optics, which is a way of really visualizing, hey, I want light to do this or that. How do I do it? I can imagine just bending the rays, like a lot of people think of it in terms of invisibility, just moving the rays around. And the best way to visualize this is imagine a sheet of rubber, a flat sheet of rubber, and light just wants to move in a straight line. So you draw a bunch of lines on a sheet of rubber, and that's what they do. They don't do anything but that. They go straight. But now you can imagine poking a hole in that rubber sheet and pushing it outwards, and all the lines suddenly deviate. They move around that region that you've opened up. So you've opened up like a hole in space. So if you want to think of that as a place where you can hide things, you can do it, because if you go to the other side, far away from where you're bending, everything's been restored. Light continues to go forward like it had passed through free space. But in fact, you opened up this hole and you caused all these light rays to deviate around it as if they'd passed through something that was just empty. And it turns out there's a mathematical transformation that you can take from that picture to design your material. It's just one step. You have that picture, and then you say, here's a material that will do that for me. So I replace that bendy part of of that rubber sheet with a material that actually duplicates that function. So that's the connection. So there's a few things. There's an algorithm, how we do this, how we visualize it, how we do the math, and then how we create the material that actually achieves that. So in the end, what we did was created this cylindrical object, and the cylindrical object had a hole inside where you could hide things. You could put anything you want there, and all the electromagnetic waves would flow around that and then be restored as if having passed through free space.
Wow, that's so cool. I had no idea that you guys were actually manipulating light. Like, that's crazy. So, in the pages of Marvel Comics, Dr. Sue Storm, aka the Invisible Woman, was exposed to cosmic radiation, which allows her to turn invisible. She can also manipulate wavelengths of light, allowing her to turn objects invisible as well. In the real world, how close are we to technology that can make a person or an object invisible?
So in the real world, I think it definitely has its challenges. The important thing about the experiment we did and this idea of transformation optics is that there's a proof of concept that you can make something. The interesting thing about Sue Storm and a lot of the invisibility is that it happens without a material, without a cloak. And the only way that we know that that can happen is to actually bend space itself. So light travels in a straight line. It doesn't interact with itself, and it's not affected by gravity as in a way that we simply understand, but it actually does deviate and can be bent by some large mass or some large energy. And so if you want to make something invisible, presumably, this is not something that is going to be done tomorrow. If you had a very large energy source, you could actually deviate the rays around an object. And presumably is if you think of how Sue Storm is described about being able to bend light rays, that would be the way to do it. Now, the problem with that is if you don't have a cloak or anything, you would need an enormous amount of energy, just an incredible amount of energy. In the world of science fiction, energy is limitless, so things like that are not necessarily a problem. But they would be because you need something like a black hole to get that. And then there's a number of other issues about how you would actually control that to create the true invisibility. But there is a mathematical prescription that says how you might do it. And there is the reality that light does bend. And this is known, for example, during one of the most famous experiments showed that light was bent around the sun because of its gravitational pull and the fact that it was actually bending space. So if you were to ask me how Sue Storm does it, I think somehow she's bending space around her with some sort of energy source that does not yet exist in our world.
That definitely sounds like what must be happening, but man, that amount of power is almost impossible to think about, especially for just one person. So over the course of your career, what's the most surprising thing that you've learned about the physics behind invisibility?
The surprising thing about invisibility is that it was possible, I'd say. There's a number of ways that have been imagined to do invisibility. And this is a very, very physicsy way. This is sort of fundamental. So the idea, if you wanted to hide something from any direction whatsoever and also have something that didn't cast a shadow or reflect, this is a solution. And it's a remarkable solution, and it's surprising that it came about so simply with this mathematics that was used. So there's a number of aspects of invisibility that are interesting, but I think the most surprising about this was that there was a true solution. As complicated as it is and limited as it is, it just has this piece of inspiration that says, hey, maybe there's more out there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for joining us today and telling us all about your research. It's really given us a new insight into how powerful Sue Storm is and her abilities. Thank you so much for sharing with us all of your knowledge.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
In Fantastic Four issue number 532, released in 2005, writer J. Michael Straczynski and artist Mike McKone tell a galactic story that takes Reed Richards back to a time before the Big Bang, where chaos reigns. Reed encounters an alien named the Entity, who warns him that the universe will rip apart at the seams if he can't stop the destruction. Reed opens his mind to the Entity in an attempt to find a solution. As the two hurtle through time, watching planets and living things evolve, they discover that life and all of its creatures are the universe's attempt at understanding itself, and that it must keep growing. Once the entity feels satisfied with an answer, it offers Reed the opportunity to join it on a path towards the future. However, Reed misses his family and asks to be returned home, where he's reunited with his wife Sue and their Fantastic Four teammates Ben and Johnny. He reflects back on his cosmic journey and comes to this realization. Some things, it seems, are too big for the human mind to retain for very long. But I remember the moments. I remember the important things. And that's all that matters. The moments. Next week on the Official Marvel Podcast, we'll hear from the cast of Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps: Joseph Quinn, Eben Moss-Backrack, Vanessa Kirby, and Pedro Pascal.
I love the idea of a family unit that extends itself for the betterment of humankind.
That's it for this episode. If you haven't already, make sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening. It helps other Marvel fans find the show.
Yep, that's right. And make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode.
This episode was hosted by Evan Narcis and myself, Victoria Ying.
Our producers are Jasmine Estrada and Anita Flores,
with help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, Brad Barton, and Production Manager, Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Zachary Goldberg.
Theme music by Ida Akbal.
Executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.